They say God doesn't give you more than you can handle, but what if that's exactly why He chose you? Think about it. Every trial, every setback, every moment when the world tried to break you, it wasn't random. The most precious metals are refined in the hottest fires, and the most powerful spirits are forged through the greatest trials. You're not watching this by accident. If you felt that unexplainable force pulling you towards something greater, that burning in your soul that won't let you settle for ordinary, you already know. You're one of the chosen ones, and by the end of this message, you'll understand why your struggles weren't just tests. They were preparation for something far beyond what this world thought possible. When God marks you as chosen, it isn't a golden ticket to an easy life. It's an invitation to carry weight that would crush anyone else. The world sees your divine selection as a blessing, but they don't understand the true cost of being unstoppable. Every chosen vessel throughout history learned this truth. Your calling isn't about comfort, it's about purpose. Think about Moses facing the impossible at the Red Sea, David standing before Goliath with nothing but faith, Daniel in the lion's den. These weren't just stories of triumph, they were moments when being chosen meant standing alone against impossible odds. The world only saw the miracles, but they missed the nights of doubt, the tears of isolation, the moments when these chosen ones questioned everything. Here's what they don't tell you about being unstoppable. It's not about never falling. It's about how God keeps raising you up. When the world swears you should stay down, every chosen one carries marks, not just of victory, but of warfare, spiritual battles that left scars. Moments when their faith was tested beyond human limits, but that's exactly why God chose them, not because they were perfect, but because they were perfectly prepared to be broken and rebuilt. The price of being unstoppable isn't paid in comfort or convenience. It's paid in surrendered nights, in battles fought when no one's watching, in moments when your only company is the God who called you. The world sees your victories and calls it favor, but they don't see the altar where you laid everything down, including your right to give up. When God marks you as unstoppable, He's not promising a path of ease. He's promising that no matter what comes against you, His purpose will prevail. The weight of being chosen isn't in the winning, it's in the willing to keep standing when everything within you begs to retreat. This isn't about being special, it's about being specified for a divine purpose that's bigger than your comfort, bigger than your fears, and bigger than anything the world can throw against you. Most people pray for lighter burdens, but God's chosen ones are different. They're forged in fires that would destroy anyone else. Remember the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The fire was meant to destroy them, but it only proved their divine selection. That's how God works with His chosen ones. He doesn't prevent the fire, He transforms it into your testimony. When heaven selects a vessel, it doesn't start with blessings, it starts with breaking. Every chosen one in history went through their own furnace of affliction. Joseph didn't go straight from his father's favor to Egypt's throne. He went through the pit, through slavery, through prison. But here's what makes chosen ones different. Where others see destruction, they recognize divine construction. Think about gold for a moment. It becomes pure by enduring temperatures so hot that everything that isn't gold burns away. Your trials aren't random acts of chaos, they're calculated acts of refinement. Every betrayal, every setback, every moment when it felt like your world was burning down around you, that was your refining fire. But here's what separates the chosen ones from everyone else. They don't just survive the fire, they absorb its power. While others break under pressure, they become unbreakable. While others cry, "Why me?" they understand, "Why not me?" Because being chosen means understanding that your greatest pain becomes your greatest power, your deepest wounds become weapons in God's hands. The world looks at the fire and sees destruction. Chosen ones look at the same fire and see transformation. They understand that God isn't just testing their faith, He's transforming their nature. Every trial isn't just about surviving, it's about emerging as something new, something stronger, something that the old fire can't touch anymore. There's a truth about being chosen that nobody talks about. It's not about being special, it's about being specified. When God marks someone as chosen, He's not looking for perfection, He's looking for potential, and not the kind the world recognizes. He's searching for something deeper, something that most people are too afraid to embrace, the capacity to be completely emptied of self and filled with divine purpose. Look at the great chosen ones throughout history. Mary was just a young girl when she was selected to carry divinity. Paul was actively persecuting believers when God chose him. But here's the raw truth. It's about being broken enough to be rebuilt according to God's specifications. When God chooses someone, He's not picking the strongest, the smartest, or the most qualified. He's selecting the ones who will say yes when everyone else says it's impossible. The ones who will stand when logic says to run. The ones who will believe when doubt seems more reasonable than faith. It's not about your ability, it's about your availability to be used for purposes bigger than yourself. Here's what makes divine selection so different from worldly choice. God doesn't choose you for who you are, He chooses you for who He knows you'll become. Every chosen vessel goes through a process of divine reconstruction. Your past mistakes aren't disqualifications, they're preparations. Your wounds aren't weaknesses, they're future wells of wisdom. Every scar you carry becomes a story of God's transformative power. The unspoken truth is that being chosen often feels more like a burden than a blessing at first, because God's not just changing your circumstances, He's changing your entire nature. He's not just giving you a new mission, He's giving you a new identity, and that kind of transformation doesn't come cheap. It costs everything you think you are to become everything He knows you can be. When God chooses someone, He doesn't just change their life, He changes the rules that govern their reality. Think about it. Moses parted seas. Joshua commanded the sun to stand still. Elijah called down fire from heaven. These weren't just miracles, they were moments when divine selection overwrote the laws of nature. When you're chosen, impossible becomes a word that loses its power over your life. Here's what most people don't understand. Divine authority doesn't operate within the boundaries of human logic. The world has its systems, its limitations, that's just how things work. But chosen ones operate under a different jurisdiction. When heaven backs your purpose, natural limitations become mere suggestions. Look at David, a shepherd boy facing a giant. By natural law, he should have been destroyed, but chosen ones don't fight with natural weapons. Their authority comes from a higher source. Their power doesn't flow from human ability, but from divine appointment. That's why the normal rules of engagement don't apply to them. They're not fighting in their own strength, they're wielding heaven's authority. What looks like defiance to the world is simply obedience to a higher calling. When chosen ones seem to break the rules, they're actually aligning with God's superior laws. Think about Peter walking on water. He wasn't breaking the law of gravity. He was operating under the higher law of faith. That's what divine selection does. It lifts you above the natural realm into the supernatural. But here's the crucial truth. This authority isn't for personal glory, it's for divine purpose. When God rewrites the rules for His chosen ones, it's not to make their lives easier, it's to make His power more evident. Every limitation they overcome, every boundary they break, every impossible situation they conquer becomes a testament not to human ability, but to divine authority. There's a price for walking in divine purpose that few are willing to discuss, the altar of sacrifice that every chosen one must face. It's not about giving up something small, it's about laying everything down. your plans, your timing, your understanding of how life should work. When God marks you as chosen, He's not asking for your spare time, He's asking for your entire life. The world thinks sacrifice is about loss, but chosen ones understand a deeper truth. Sacrifice is about exchange. Abraham wasn't just giving up Isaac, he was exchanging his understanding for God's provision. Job didn't just lose everything, he exchanged his temporary comfort for eternal purpose. Every chosen vessel throughout history learned that what looks like loss to the world becomes gain in God's economy. Here's what separates divine sacrifice from worldly sacrifice. It's not about what you're giving up, it's about what you're giving access to. When you surrender your limitations, you gain access to God's limitless power. When you sacrifice your timeline, you step into divine timing. When you lay down your understanding, you receive heaven's wisdom. It's not a loss, it's a supernatural upgrade. But let's be real, this kind of sacrifice burns. It's supposed to. Real sacrifice should cost you something. It should hurt, because that pain isn't just discomfort, it's the sensation of your old nature being stripped away. Every time chosen ones step onto the altar of sacrifice, something of their old self dies and something of their divine nature emerges. That's why the sacrifice is sacred. It's not just about giving up, it's about becoming. The path of the chosen one is paved with these sacred sacrifices. Each one is a declaration, not my will, but yours. Each surrender becomes a stepping stone to greater authority. Each letting go becomes a receiving of something greater. That's the paradox of divine selection. Your greatest advancement often comes through your deepest surrender. What separates God's chosen ones isn't that they never fall, it's what happens when they do. When the world thinks they're finished, they're really just beginning. Because in divine economy, defeat isn't the end of the story, it's the setup for resurrection power. Every chosen vessel throughout history had their death moment before their defining moment. Look at Joseph in that pit, David in his cave, Daniel in the lion's den. The world saw defeat, but heaven saw deployment. That's the pattern of divine selection. Before every resurrection comes a crucifixion. Before every triumph comes a trial. The chosen ones understand something profound. In God's hands, rock bottom becomes solid foundation. Your lowest point becomes your launching pad. Here's what makes chosen ones unstoppable. They don't just survive their falls, they absorb the lesson. Where others see shame, they see training. Where others see failure, they see preparation. Every time they hit the ground, they don't just get up, they rise with new wisdom, new strength, new authority. Their defeats don't define them, they refine them. But there's a deeper truth here. Resurrection isn't just about getting back up, it's about coming back different. When chosen ones rise from their ashes, they're not the same person who fell. They carry something new, a divine impartation that only comes through death to self. Every time they rise, they shed more of their limited human nature and put on more of their divine nature. This is why the enemy's greatest weapon, defeat, becomes God's greatest tool in the lives of His chosen ones. Because chosen ones don't just rise, they rise upgraded. They don't just recover, they transform. Every attack intended to end them becomes the very thing that elevates them to a new level of spiritual authority. That's not just survival, that's supernatural resurrection power. When God positions His chosen ones, they become more than vessels, they become mirrors of divine truth. But this isn't about reflecting light, it's about exposing darkness. Every chosen one becomes a walking revelation that makes the invisible visible. They don't just carry truth, they reveal it in ways that shake the foundations of deception. Think about how Moses stood before Pharaoh. His presence didn't just demand freedom, it exposed the powerlessness of Egypt's gods. That's what happens when chosen ones take their position. They don't just speak truth, they become living proof that exposes every counterfeit. Their very existence becomes a testimony that makes darkness uncomfortable and forces hidden things into light. Here's the power of divine reflection. Chosen ones don't need to fight every battle with words. Their lives become the argument that silences opposition. When you're carrying divine purpose, your mere presence starts disturbing darkness. Systems of control start shaking. Strongholds of deception start crumbling, not because you're fighting them, but because you're reflecting something that darkness can't stand against. But there's a cost to being God's mirror. Every chosen one learns this truth. When you reflect divine light, you attract both moths and bats. Some will be drawn to the truth you carry, others will attack because that same truth exposes them. That's why chosen ones face such intense opposition. They're not just carrying a message, they're carrying manifestation that makes it impossible for darkness to hide. The divine mirror effect isn't just about reflecting God's power, it's about revealing His nature. When chosen ones stand in their authority, they don't just demonstrate what God can do, they reveal who He is. Every victory, every breakthrough, every impossible situation overcome becomes a reflection not of human ability, but of divine nature. They become living proof that what God promises, He performs. There's a truth about divine selection that few are prepared for, the holy solitude that comes with being chosen. The higher God takes you, the fewer people can walk with you. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Every major vessel God used had their wilderness season, their moment of divine isolation, where they learned to hear one voice above all others. Moses had his 40 years in Midian. Jesus had his 40 days in the wilderness. John the Baptist lived in total isolation before his ministry began. The pattern is clear. Before God elevates His chosen ones to public purpose, He draws them into private preparation. But here's what most don't understand. This solitude isn't about being alone, it's about being alone with God. In these seasons of sacred solitude, something profound happens. The voices that used to influence you grow quiet. The opinions that used to guide you fade away. All that's left is the voice of the one who chose you. That's when the real transformation begins. In the silence, away from the crowd's expectations and the world's definitions, you learn who you really are in God's eyes. But let's be honest, this divine isolation burns. It's supposed to. Because it's in this place of being stripped of all human support that you discover a deeper truth. God's presence is more than enough. When every other foundation is removed, you learn to stand on the only foundation that cannot be shaken. That's why chosen ones emerge from their wilderness different. They've learned to draw strength from a source beyond human understanding. The loneliness that would break others becomes the very thing that makes chosen ones unshakable. Because when you've learned to walk alone with God, you're never really alone again. You carry presence that makes crowds irrelevant. You operate in authority that doesn't need human approval. You've learned the sacred truth that sometimes the most powerful position isn't in the spotlight, it's in the secret place with God. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when human limitations meet divine enablement. It's not about pushing past normal boundaries. It's about operating in a realm where those boundaries don't even exist. When God selects a vessel, He doesn't just enhance their natural abilities, He introduces them to supernatural capacity that defies human understanding. Look at Gideon's army of 300 defeating thousands, or Elijah outrunning chariots. These weren't stories about human potential. They were demonstrations of divine power working through surrendered vessels. That's what happens when chosen ones fully embrace their calling. They stop operating by human metrics and start moving in divine momentum. Their limitations aren't removed, they're rendered irrelevant. Here's what sets chosen ones apart. They understand that their inadequacy is actually an advantage. When Paul said, "When I am weak, then I'm strong," he wasn't being poetic. He was revealing a divine principle. True power isn't found in human capability. It's found in complete dependence on God's ability. That's when the impossible becomes inevitable, not because you're strong, but because His strength is perfect in weakness. But this isn't about occasional bursts of supernatural power. It's about living in a constant state of divine enablement. Chosen ones learn to access heaven's resources as naturally as breathing. They don't pray for strength. They learn to live from a place of already being strengthened. They don't beg for breakthrough. They operate from a position of already having overcome. Their limitations become launch pads for God's glory. What looks like superhuman ability to the world is really just supernatural surrender to heaven's authority. When chosen ones seem to break natural laws, they're really just aligning with higher laws. They're not defying physics, they're applying faith, not overcoming human limitations, but operating beyond them in a realm where God's word becomes the only reality that matters. Every chosen one faces a moment when their selection isn't just challenged, it's seemingly contradicted. It's the moment when everything God promised appears impossible, when every door seems sealed, when heaven itself seems silent. This isn't just another trial, it's the ultimate test that separates those who were called from those who were chosen. Remember Abraham on Mount Moriah, knife raised over his promise. David hiding in caves while carrying a king's anointing. Jesus on the cross crying out, "Why have you forsaken me?" These weren't just moments of testing, they were moments of divine authentication. Because the ultimate test for every chosen one isn't in their ability to succeed, it's in their willingness to obey when obedience seems to contradict the very promise they're carrying. Here's what makes this test ultimate. It targets your deepest conviction. It's not about your abilities, it's about your identity. When everything around you screams that you were wrong, that you misheard God, that you're not really chosen, that's when your true selection is revealed. Not in your performance, but in your persistence. Not in your success, but in your surrender. But there's a divine paradox at work. The ultimate test isn't designed to break you, it's designed to reveal you. Just as fire doesn't create gold's purity, it reveals it. These moments of extreme pressure don't create your chosen status, they confirm it. The intensity of your test is actually a reflection of the magnitude of your calling. The greater the assignment, the greater the authentication required. This is where chosen ones separate themselves from the merely called. When everything logical says quit, when every circumstance says surrender, when even their own thoughts betray them, they stand. Not because they're strong, but because they're submitted. Not because they understand, but because they trust. They've learned that in God's economy, the ultimate test isn't about passing or failing. It's about surrendering to His purpose, regardless of the cost. The mark of being chosen was never about your perfection, it was about your purpose. Every trial you faced, every battle you fought, every moment when you felt completely alone, it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God wasn't testing your strength, He was proving His faithfulness through your life. You're not watching this by accident. That fire in your spirit, that knowing that won't let you settle for ordinary existence, that's not just emotion, it's evidence. Evidence that you're carrying something heaven wants to release through your life. The world calls it impossible, religion calls it radical, but chosen ones, they call it destiny. Your struggles haven't disqualified you, they've distinguished you. Your battles haven't defeated you, they've defined you. And those moments when you should have broken, they just proved you can't be broken. Not because you're special, but because you're specified for a purpose bigger than yourself. The question isn't whether you're chosen. The question is, will you finally embrace why you were chosen? Because make no mistake, what you've encountered so far is just the preparation. What's coming next is the manifestation. The world is waiting for chosen ones to take their place. Not perfect people, but surrendered vessels. Not those who've never fallen, but those who've learned to rise with resurrection power. Your time of testing isn't over, it's evolving into your time of testimony. If this message has ignited something in your spirit, don't let this be just another video. Let it be the moment when you finally understood. You're not just called, you're not just gifted, you're chosen. And what God starts in His chosen ones, He completes for His glory.